What would you do if the perfect life you meticulously built, the man you loved with every fiber of your being, and the precious new future you were carrying inside you were all revealed to be built on a devastating, calculated lie? This isn't a story about a simple affair. This is the story of Samantha Davenport, a woman who stood on the precipice of having everything only to discover her millionaire husband was a pawn and she was the target. It's a story about how a woman pushed to the absolute edge, stopped crying, and started fighting, orchestrating a takedown so public and so complete that it would bring an empire to its knees. Stay with me as we uncover how she exposed the truth in front of the entire world, leaving a man who had it all, with nothing but his profound regret. The silence in our Bel Air mansion was a language I had learned to interpret. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the hollow, echoing silence of absence. It clung to the marble floors and high ceilings of the home Jonathan Davenport had proudly called our palace. From the outside, we were the picture of success. Jonathan, at 38, was a tech magnate, the CEO of Davenport Innovations, a man whose ambition was as sharp and polished as the glass walls of his downtown skyscraper. And Samantha, at 32, was his elegant wife, the one who organized the flawless charity galas, who knew which fork to use, and who was now finally 6 months pregnant with our first child. Our life was a carefully curated Instagram feed. Weekends in Aspen, summers in the Hamptons, photographs of us smiling, clinking champagne glasses on a yacht with captions about being blessed. But for the past year, the smiles in those photos had felt brittle staged. The warmth had slowly been leaching out of our marriage like heat from a poorly insulated room. Jonathan was distant, his phone a permanent appendage to his hand. His excuses, a repeating playlist of late-night investor calls, emergency board meetings, and closing a big deal. He'd come home long after I was asleep, the scent of expensive whiskey and a faint, unfamiliar perfume clinging to his clothes. At first, I'd dismissed it. He was under pressure. The company was expanding globally. This was the price of ambition. I was his partner. I had to be supportive. "You're tired, John," I'd say in the morning, handing him a perfectly brewed macchiato. "You're working too hard." "It'll be worth it, Sam," he'd reply, his eyes scanning the financial news on his tablet, never quite meeting mine. "For us, for the baby, our little girl. She was supposed to be the glue, the culmination of our 10-year journey together." I had envisioned this period as a time of intimate connection, of Jonathan rubbing my swollen belly, of us whispering potential names to each other in the dark. Instead, I found myself rubbing my own belly, whispering to my unborn daughter in an empty king-size bed. The loneliness was a physical ache, a cold dread that settled deep in my bones. I mentioned it to my best friend Chloe over lunch one afternoon. "He's just stressed, right?" I asked, pushing a piece of arugula around my plate, my appetite gone. Men get weird when their wives are pregnant. It's the pressure of it all. Chloe, ever the pragmatist, looked at me with her piercing, honest eyes. "Pressure is one thing, Sam. Disappearing is another. The John I know, the one who couldn't keep his hands off you at our wedding, wouldn't let a deal, no matter how big, turn him into a ghost." Her words were a splinter under my skin, irritating and true. That night, the illusion began to crack. Jonathan came home around 2 a.m. I pretended to be asleep, listening to his movements. He undressed in the dark, and as he draped his suit jacket over the valet stand, a small glossy card fell from the pocket. My heart hammered against my ribs. I waited until his breathing evened out into a deep sleep before I slipped out of bed. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It wasn't a business card. It was a matchbook from the Crimson Orchid, an exclusive, notoriously discreet lounge downtown I'd never even heard of. Scrawled on the inside in elegant feminine handwriting was a message: "Last night was just the beginning. Can't wait for the encore. See." The letter hung in the air, a venomous, silent accusation. the world tilted on its axis. The cold dread I'd been feeling wasn't just loneliness, it was instinct, a primal warning system I had been trying so desperately to ignore. My husband, the father of my child, was living a secret life, and the gilded cage I called home suddenly felt like a prison. The silence was no longer just an absence. It was the sound of betrayal, and I was standing right in the middle of it. The matchbook felt like it was burning a hole in my hand. C. The initial was a brand searing itself into my mind. I spent the rest of the night wide awake staring at the ceiling, my mind a chaotic storm of possibilities. Who was she? How long had this been going on? Every late night, every rushed phone call, every vague excuse clicked into place, forming a hideous mosaic of deceit. The next morning, I confronted him. I tried to be calm, to be the rational wife, not the hysterical, pregnant woman he was already starting to treat me as. I placed the matchbook on the marble countertop next to his macchiato. "What's this, John?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. He glanced at it, his expression barely flickering. He was a master of the corporate poker face. "A matchbook. We went out for drinks with the team from the Tokyo office, celebrating the merger. The Crimson Orchid and C." I pressed my heart, thudding. Which team member was that Christopher Carlton? He sighed, a long, weary sound, designed to make me feel small and foolish. "Cassandra Pierce. She's the lead counsel for the firm we're acquiring. A brilliant legal mind. And yes, Sam, she writes like a woman, because she is one. Are we really going to do this? I'm trying to build an empire for our family, and you're interrogating me over a matchbook." He was gaslighting me, turning my valid suspicion into a childish accusation. He made it sound like I was jeopardizing our future with my insecurity. Part of me, the part that had loved and trusted him for a decade, wanted so desperately to believe him. But the other part, the part that had seen the guilt flash in his eyes for a split second, knew he was lying. That week was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Jonathan became overly attentive, a caricature of a loving husband. He brought me flowers, peonies my favorite, but they felt like a bribe. He'd call me from the office, his voice dripping with affection, asking how I and the little one were doing. It was all a performance, a smokescreen designed to placate me, to make me doubt my own instincts. But the seed of doubt had taken root, and it was growing into a thorny vine of certainty. I started to look for more. It felt dirty, invasive, like I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, but I had to know the truth. One evening, while he was in the shower, I did something I had never done in 10 years. I looked at his phone. It was a new model, and he'd changed the passcode from our anniversary to something else. But he had forgotten about the synced laptop in his study. My hands shook as I opened it. His message history was a minefield. I avoided his texts, knowing they'd be the most guarded. I went for the app he used, at least the ride-sharing app. The trip history was a map of his betrayal. Multiple trips to the Crimson Orchid, late-night rides to a luxury condo building in the financial district, the Sovereign, and early morning pickups from the same address. Sometimes just an hour before he'd walk into our home, feigning exhaustion from a long night at the office. The address was my next target. With my hands trembling, I typed it into a search engine. The Sovereign was one of the most exclusive and expensive new developments in the city. The kind of place with biometric security and private elevators designed for ultimate discretion. I then searched the name he had given me, Cassandra Pierce. The first result was a LinkedIn profile. She was exactly as he'd described, lead counsel at a top-tier firm. The photo was of a stunning woman in her early 30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes, raven black hair, and a smile that was both inviting and predatory. She looked powerful, ambitious, and utterly unbothered. The second result was a Society magazine article about the city's top 40 under 40. She was featured posing in a sleek, modern apartment. My blood ran cold when I saw the view from her window, the exact same panoramic cityscape visible from the penthouse floors of the Sovereign. The final piece clicked into place when I checked our joint credit card statement online. Tucked between charges for baby furniture and organic groceries were recurring payments that I had overlooked. Thousands of dollars to a high-end jewelry store, a luxury lingerie boutique, and the most damning of all, a monthly wire transfer of $50,000 labeled Consulting Fee, CP Enterprises. CP Cassandra Pierce. It wasn't just drinks. It wasn't just an affair. He was funding her entire lifestyle. The flowers on my nightstand suddenly wilted before my eyes. They weren't a bribe. They were an insult. He was buying my silence with my own money while he built a second life with another woman. The betrayal was so much deeper, so much more calculated than I could have ever imagined. The grief was overwhelming, a physical blow that knocked the air from my lungs and left me sobbing on the cold leather chair in his study, a ghost in my own home. The initial wave of grief was a tsunami, leaving me shattered and breathless. For 2 days, I barely left my bed, the weight of Jonathan's betrayal a physical pressure on my chest. Every shared memory felt tainted, every promise a lie. He saw my devastation and attributed it to pregnancy hormones patting my head with a patronizing sympathy that made my skin crawl. "Get some rest, Sam," he'd say. "You're just being emotional." He had no idea I knew. He thought he was still in control. But as the grief receded, something else took its place, a cold, hard anger. This wasn't just a man who had strayed. This was a man who was actively, consciously deceiving me while I carried his child. And this Cassandra Pierce wasn't just a mistress. The consulting fee was a red flag. What kind of legal counsel for an acquisition gets a personal monthly retainer of $50,000 wired to a private enterprise? My friend Chloe came over armed with ice cream and a fierce loyalty. That was the only genuine thing in my life at that moment. I laid out all the evidence, the matchbook, the rideshare history, the credit card statements, the LinkedIn profile. "Oh, honey," she said, wrapping an arm around me. "He's not just a cheat. He's a colossal fool. What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I whispered, my voice hoarse from crying. "Confront him, scream, pack a bag, and leave. You could," she said softly. "And no one would blame you, but you're carrying his child. You built this life with him, this company even. You were there from the beginning when Davenport Innovations was just him and a laptop in your spare bedroom. You can't just let this predator walk away with it all." Her words sparked something in me. She was right. I had poured my own inheritance into his startup years ago. I had been his sounding board, his unpaid strategist, the one who kept our life running so he could focus on his ambition. I wasn't just the wife, I was a silent, founding partner, and I would not be erased. My mindset shifted. This was no longer just about a broken heart. It was about survival for me and for my daughter. I needed to understand the enemy. I needed to know everything about Cassandra Pierce. My online search had given me her professional face, but I needed to see the real person. The next afternoon, I did something the old Samantha would never have dreamed of. I drove to the financial district and parked across the street from the Sovereign. Dressed in a simple coat and a hat that partially obscured my face, I waited. For hours I sat there, the engine off, watching the endless parade of wealth and power come and go. Just after 6 p.m., Jonathan's black sedan pulled up. He got out, not with the weary slump of an overworked executive, but with a spring in his step I hadn't seen in years. A few moments later, Cassandra emerged from the building to greet him. Seeing them together in person was a visceral shock. She was even more striking than in her photo. She looped her arm through his, and they laughed, their bodies close, familiar. The way he looked at her with an unguarded adoration he once reserved for me was a dagger to the heart. But I forced myself to watch, to analyze. She wasn't just beautiful, she was a chameleon. She projected an image of effortless power, but her eyes were constantly scanning, assessing. There was a hardness there, a transactional quality that the camera didn't capture. As they turned to walk to a nearby restaurant, I saw her hand slide down his back, a gesture that was less about affection and more about possession. I followed them to the restaurant, a place so exclusive it didn't even have a sign. I sat in a cafe across the street, nursing a single cup of tea for over an hour, watching them through the large plate glass window. They were a power couple holding court. She did most of the talking, her hands animated, her expression intense. Jonathan was mesmerized, hanging on her every word. She wasn't his mistress. She was his guru, his advocate, his everything. She was systematically replacing me in every facet of his life. A chilling thought occurred to me. The consulting fee wasn't for sex. It was for something far more insidious. She was consulting him on his business, on his life, and likely on how to handle me. She was the architect of my ruin, and my husband was her willing apprentice. This realization changed everything. A simple confrontation would be useless. He was under her spell. He would choose her. They would paint me as the unstable hormonal wife, and I'd be cast aside with a settlement designed to keep me quiet. I couldn't fight them head on. If I was going to protect myself and my child, I had to be smarter, more calculating, and more ruthless than both of them combined. I needed a professional. Driving home that night, the tears were gone, replaced by an icy resolve. I wasn't just going to expose them, I was going to dismantle the entire charade. I pulled over and made a call to a number Chloe had given me weeks ago, one I had prayed I'd never need. "Hello," a gruff voice answered. "Hello," I said, my voice clear and cold as steel. "My name is Samantha Davenport. I need to hire a private investigator." The man I hired was a former detective named Frank Harding. He was a no-nonsense, old-school investigator who operated out of a modest office that smelled of stale coffee and photocopier toner. He listened to my story without judgment, his expression unreadable as he studied the documents I'd brought. "It's a classic playbook, Mrs. Davenport," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Isolate the target, build dependency, gain control of the assets. This Cassandra Pierce, she sounds like a pro. This isn't her first rodeo. I need to know everything." I told him, my hands clasped tightly on the table. Her real name, if it's not Pierce, where she came from, who her past clients were. I need to know what her endgame is. "Endgames like this are always the same," Harding grunted. "Total financial takeover. She'll have him sign over power of attorney, change his will, liquidate assets into accounts she controls. By the time he realizes what's happening, he'll be broke and she'll be a ghost." The clinical way he described it sent a shiver down my spine. This was a whole different level of predatory behavior. Jonathan wasn't just having an affair. He was being systematically dismantled by a corporate-level con artist. Harding agreed to take the case, and his first reports started coming in within a week. What he uncovered was more shocking than I could have prepared for. Cassandra Pierce was a phantom. The name was real, but it was new. She had legally changed it 3 years prior. Before that, she was Caroline Polson, and before that, she was Catherine Peters. She had a trail of identities across 3 different states. With each identity came a new target, a widowed real estate tycoon in Arizona, a tech startup founder in Austin, a commodities trader in Chicago. The pattern was identical. She would embed herself into their lives, first as a brilliant consultant or advocate, someone indispensable to their business. The affair was just the tool she used to gain emotional leverage. Then the financial bleed would begin. Shell corporations like the CP Enterprises she was using with Jonathan would appear. Assets would be transferred. In every case, the man was left financially and professionally ruined, often mired in legal battles and tax investigations long after she had vanished. The commodities trader had even served jail time for fraudulent activities she had orchestrated. Harding's report included police statements from the other victims. They all described the same woman, impossibly charismatic, whip-smart, and utterly merciless. They spoke of how she had turned them against their families, their business partners, and their oldest friends, and convincing them that she was the only one they could trust. As I read the files, I saw the exact same pattern unfolding in my own life. Over the last few months, Jonathan had become increasingly paranoid and isolated. He'd had a massive falling out with his longtime business partner and friend, Ben Carter, accusing him of trying to undermine his authority, an accusation that sounded suspiciously like something Cassandra would have whispered in his ear. He was ignoring calls from his own parents. He was relying on Cassandra for everything. The most chilling discovery was what Harding found about her methods. She was a master of digital forgery and manipulation. She could create fake email chains, falsify financial reports, and plant digital evidence to frame people. She wasn't just a con artist, she was a saboteur. I realized with a jolt of terror that she wasn't just trying to get rid of me, she was likely building a case against me. My mind raced back over the last few weeks. The strange glitches with my laptop, an email I supposedly sent to our wealth manager asking about liquidating certain joint assets, an email I had no memory of writing and had dismissed as a technical error, a call from our home security company about the alarm code being changed, which Jonathan had brushed off, saying he'd handled it. She was setting me up. She was probably building a narrative for Jonathan that I was the unstable one, the gold digger, the one trying to take his money. It was diabolical. I felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with fear. I wasn't just fighting for a fair divorce settlement anymore. I was fighting for my name, my reputation, and my daughter's future. I couldn't let this woman win. She had underestimated me. She saw me as a society wife, a decorative accessory. She had no idea who she was dealing with. Armed with Harding's files, I began to formulate a plan. A quiet divorce was off the table. A private confrontation was pointless. The only way to stop a creature like Cassandra was to expose her to the light so publicly and so completely that she would have nowhere left to hide. She had chosen to wage this war in the shadows, using manipulation and deceit. I would end it in the brightest, most unforgiving spotlight I could find. The perfect stage was already set. The Davenport Innovations 10th Anniversary Gala. It was the biggest event of the year, a celebration of Jonathan's success with hundreds of investors, employees, and media in attendance. It was meant to be his crowning achievement. Instead, it would be his day of reckoning, and I would be the one conducting the orchestra. The 2 months leading up to the gala were the most difficult of my life. I had to become an actress, playing the part of the fragile, slightly clueless, and heartbroken wife. It was a nauseating role, but my survival depended on it. I had to lull them into a false sense of security to make them believe I was a non-threat. Outwardly, I appeared defeated. I stopped asking Jonathan where he'd been. I let him see my tear-stained face. When he spoke of Cassandra, which he began to do more openly, I would simply look away, a portrait of silent misery. Cassandra thinks we should divest from the European project, he'd say over a breakfast I could barely stomach. Her foresight is incredible, Sam. She sees angles no one else does. That's nice, dear, I'd reply, my voice a monotone. Inside, I was a raging inferno, meticulously logging every piece of information, cross-referencing it with the files from Harding. Harding, meanwhile, continued to dig, and his work was invaluable. He managed to track down 2 of Cassandra's previous victims. One, the real estate tycoon from Arizona, was a broken man living in a small rented condo, his fortune gone. He was too afraid of legal repercussions to speak publicly, but he agreed to provide a sworn affidavit detailing her entire scheme, complete with copies of the fraudulent documents she had used. The other, the tech founder from Austin, a woman named Rebecca Shaw, was different. Cassandra, then Caroline Paulson, had been her business partner and lover, and the betrayal had left her bankrupt and her reputation in tatters. But Rebecca had fought back. She'd spent years rebuilding her life and had a fire in her eyes. When Harding approached her, she was ready for a fight. That woman destroyed my life, Rebecca told me over a secure video call. She's a parasite. If you have a chance to stop her, you take it. I'll give you everything I have. Rebecca provided us with the smoking gun, a recorded phone call in which Caroline coached an accomplice on how to falsify SEC filings to frame Rebecca. The voice was unmistakable. It was Cassandra's. My arsenal was growing. I had sworn affidavits, financial records, tracing the money from Jonathan's accounts to Cassandra's offshore shells, and now a recording of her committing a federal crime. The next step was to secure my own future. I met with the best divorce attorney in the state, a sharp-witted woman named Helen Marks. I laid out the entire situation. Helen was impressed. Most people in your position come in here with tears, she said. You've come in with a battle plan. We'll file for divorce on the morning of the gala. We'll also file for an immediate injunction to freeze all personal and corporate assets, citing potential criminal fraud. By the time he walks on that stage, he'll be a king with no kingdom. While Helen prepared the legal storm, I focused on the gala itself. I was still officially the host. I had access to the event planners, the technical crew, everything. I met with the head of the audiovisual team, a young man named Kevin, whom I had always treated with kindness and respect over the years. Kevin, I said, meeting him at the ballroom a week before the event. I have a special presentation I want to surprise my husband with, a tribute for the 10-year anniversary. It's highly confidential, and I need it to play on the main screen at a very specific time, right after he finishes his speech. He was eager to help. Of course, Mrs. Davenport. What do you need? I need your absolute discretion, I said, looking him in the eye. And I need you to give me remote access to the projector system. The file is sensitive, so I'll be uploading it myself on the night. He set it up for me, without a second thought, showing me how to control the presentation from a tablet. The pieces of my checkmate were moving into position. The week of the gala, Jonathan sat me down. He had Cassandra with him. It was the first time we were all in a room together. The audacity was breathtaking. They stood there, a united front, in the living room I had designed. "Sam," Jonathan began, his voice laced with false sincerity. "Cassandra and we have feelings for each other. This has been coming for a long time. I want to do this amicably, for the baby." Cassandra watched me, her expression a careful blend of sympathy and strength. It was a performance, and she was a star. "Samantha," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "I know this is difficult, but Jonathan's happiness is what's most important, and the company's stability. A messy divorce would be catastrophic for the shareholders." Then came the punchline. They presented me with a divorce settlement. It was an insult, a one-time payment that was less than 1% of our net worth, and a gag order preventing me from ever speaking about their relationship or his business dealings. I looked at the papers. I looked at Jonathan's cold, determined face. I looked at Cassandra's triumphant smirk barely concealed behind her mask of compassion. She thought she had won. They both did. I let a single tear roll down my cheek. "If this is what you want, Jonathan," I whispered, my voice trembling convincingly, I won't fight you." Relief washed over their faces. They had underestimated their opponent completely. They saw a weeping, defeated woman. They had no idea they were looking at their executioner. "I just have one request," I said, looking up at Jonathan. "Let me have one last night as your wife. Let me be there at the gala on your arm. Let me say goodbye to our life with dignity." Jonathan, full of magnanimous guilt, readily agreed. "Of course, Sam. It's the least I can do." Cassandra's eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second, a tiny flicker of suspicion, but it was too late. The trap was set. All they had to do now was walk into it. The night of the gala arrived with an electric tension that mirrored the storm brewing inside me. I took my time getting ready, a ritual of transformation. I chose a dress of deep emerald green silk that hugged my baby bump, a color that symbolized renewal, and in this case, retribution. I had my hair styled in elegant waves and wore the diamond earrings Jonathan had given me for our 5th anniversary, a perfect, glittering symbol of the life he was throwing away. When I descended the grand staircase, Jonathan was waiting. He was dressed in a bespoke tuxedo, looking every bit the captain of industry. He stopped short when he saw me, his eyes widening in genuine appreciation. "Sam, you look—" He trailed off, momentarily speechless. "You look beautiful." "Thank you, Jonathan," I said, my voice calm and even. For a moment, a flicker of the man I once loved was there, a shadow of regret in his eyes. But it was fleeting, quickly replaced by the new, harder man Cassandra had molded. We rode to the hotel ballroom in silence. It was the same venue where we'd had our wedding reception a decade ago. The irony was so thick, it was almost suffocating. The ballroom was a spectacle of success. Ice sculptures dripped under crystal chandeliers. A string quartet played softly, and the city's elite mingled, sipping champagne. As we entered, all eyes turned to us. We were still the golden couple. I played my part, smiling graciously, allowing him to rest a proprietary hand on the small of my back. Cassandra was already there, holding court near the stage. She wore a stunning blood-red dress that demanded attention. She was the victor, and she wanted everyone to know it. When she saw me on Jonathan's arm, her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. She had wanted him to arrive with her, but my last request had thwarted that. She glided over to us. "Samantha, you look lovely. Pregnancy agrees with you," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Thank you, Cassandra," I replied, meeting her gaze directly. "You know they say a mother's primary instinct is to protect her child at all costs. It's an incredible force of nature." I let the comment hang in the air between us, a subtle declaration of war that only she would understand. I saw that flicker of unease in her eyes again, but she quickly masked it. For the next hour, I endured the charade. I mingled with people who offered their congratulations on the baby, their faces beaming with sincerity, unaware of the drama unfolding. I watched Jonathan and Cassandra exchange charged glances across the room. I saw his business partner, Ben Carter, watching them with an expression of pure disgust before coming over to me. "Sam, are you okay?" Ben asked, his voice low. "I will be Ben," I told him, giving his arm a reassuring squeeze. "Believe me." Finally, the moment came. The chairman of the board took the stage to introduce the man of the hour. Jonathan strode up to the podium to a round of thunderous applause. I stood to the side of the stage in the wings, tablet in hand, my heart hammering against my ribs. Jonathan delivered a charismatic, powerful speech about vision, innovation, and the future of his company. He was at the pinnacle of his success, the king in his castle. And I wouldn't be here without the support of the incredible people in my life, he said, his voice ringing with emotion. He paused, and his eyes scanned the crowd, deliberately passing over me and landing on Cassandra. To my team, my board, and to Cassandra Pierce, whose brilliant counsel and unwavering belief have been a true guiding light these past months, thank you. The crowd applauded politely, though there were murmurs of confusion. It was an incredibly public and inappropriate acknowledgement. Cassandra beamed, drinking in the attention. This was my cue. As the applause died down, Jonathan turned to leave the stage. "Just one more thing," I said, my voice amplified by the microphone I had requested from Kevin the Tech. Jonathan froze. The entire room turned to look at me as I walked calmly to the center of the stage, taking the tablet from under my arm. "Jonathan, that was a beautiful speech," I said, my voice steady and clear. "And as this is the 10-year anniversary of the company we started together, I've prepared a little tribute of my own, a look back at the values and the partnerships that have made this company what it is today." Jonathan looked confused, a nervous smile plastered on his face. Cassandra's expression had turned to stone. I looked over at Kevin in the tech booth and gave him a small nod. He nodded back, ready to override my signal if anything went wrong. I didn't need him. I held up the tablet, my finger hovering over the icon. "Let's take a look," I said, and tapped the screen. The massive screen behind the stage, which had been displaying the Davenport Innovations logo, flickered to black. The ballroom fell silent. A single image appeared, a high-resolution photograph of Jonathan and Cassandra kissing passionately and undeniably on the terrace of her penthouse. The photo was dated. It was from the night of our anniversary, a night he told me he was stuck in a meeting with the Tokyo office. A collective gasp swept through the room. Jonathan's face went white as a sheet. He looked from the screen to me, his mouth opening and closing, with no sound coming out. Cassandra's face was a mask of cold fury. "As you can see," I said, my voice echoing through the silent ballroom, "my husband has been engaged in a very dedicated mentorship program." Before anyone could recover, the screen changed. It was now a split-screen display. On one side was a timeline of text messages, between them flirtatious, then intimate, then plotting. On the other side was a map showing his rideshare trips to her apartment, night after night. This mentorship required a great deal of hands-on work, often late into the night. I continued, my voice dripping with ice. Jonathan stumbled back, grabbing the podium for support. He was looking at Cassandra, his eyes begging for an explanation, but she was staring at the screen, a cornered animal. Then came the audio file. It was the recording Rebecca Shaw had given me. Cassandra's voice, cool, calculating, and unmistakable, filled the room. "No, you don't declare it like that, you idiot. You bury it in the Q3 ancillary budget. By the time their forensic accountants find it, I'll be in another hemisphere, and Rebecca Shaw will be the one taking the fall for fraud." The room erupted in murmurs. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was criminal conspiracy. I saw several of Jonathan's board members looking at each other in horror. Ben Carter was staring at Jonathan, his face a mixture of vindication and pity. "Some of you may recognize that voice," I announced, "but perhaps not the name." At the time of that recording, Cassandra Pierce was known as Caroline Polson. Before that, Catherine Peters. She has a talent for reinvention. The screen changed again. Now it was a slideshow, a mugshot of Catherine Peters for embezzlement in Chicago, a photo of Carolyn Polson with the ruined tech founder Rebecca, and finally a picture of Cassandra with the elderly real estate tycoon from Arizona looking frail and defeated. Under each picture was a summary of the financial devastation she had left in her wake. Jonathan looked like he was going to be physically sick. He was staring at Cassandra, the woman he had trusted, the woman he had thrown his family away for, and seeing her for what she truly was, a predator. But this time, I said, my voice rising, the target wasn't just one man, it was this entire company. The grand finale appeared on the screen. It was a complex flowchart, meticulously prepared by Harding and a forensic accountant I had hired. It showed a series of shell corporations, all registered in the Cayman Islands. And it showed arrows representing wire transfers moving millions of dollars from Davenport Innovations accounts, authorized by Jonathan, under Cassandra's brilliant counsel, into these untraceable entities. The final transfer for a staggering $10 million had been made that very afternoon. My husband, in his infinite trust, was convinced to sign off on these strategic investments, I explained. He was told they were for a new R&D facility. In reality, he was liquidating his own company and handing the cash to a con artist. All eyes were now on Cassandra. Her mask of composure had shattered. Pure, unadulterated rage contorted her features. Jonathan, finally breaking his paralysis, turned on her. "Is this true?" He choked out his voice, a strangled whisper. "All of it." Cassandra didn't even look at him. Her eyes were locked on me. "You bitch!" She hissed, her voice low, but carrying in the stunned silence. And then, chaos. Security guards began moving towards the stage. I saw Jonathan's lawyer frantically talking on his phone. Board members were converging on a pale, trembling CFO. The media photographers, who had been invited to capture a night of corporate triumph, were now capturing the most spectacular corporate implosion in a decade, their flashes going off like a strobe light. I looked at Jonathan one last time. He was a broken man staring at the ruins of his life displayed for the world to see. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a dawning horror, with shock, with betrayal, and finally with a sliver of the deepest, most profound regret I had ever seen. I didn't say another word. I simply turned, walked off the stage, and didn't look back. My performance was over. I didn't go home. The Bel Air mansion was no longer a home. It was a mausoleum of a dead marriage, a crime scene of betrayal. Instead, I was securely checked into a discreet suite at the Peninsula Hotel, a sanctuary arranged by my lawyer, Helen Marks. The adrenaline that had coursed through me like electricity on that stage had vanished, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. For the first time in over a year, I felt the suffocating weight of anxiety lift from my chest. I drew a bath, sank into the steaming water, and watched the city lights twinkle below, feeling like a soldier after a long and brutal war. The fight was over. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without the torment of nightmares. I slept soundly, deeply, and when I awoke, the morning sun streaming through the window felt like a promise. The story, of course, was an inferno, raging across every news outlet. I turned on the television, and there we were, a triptych of ruin, my face calm and determined on the stage, Jonathan's a mask of slack-jawed horror, and Cassandra's contorted in a snarl of pure venom. The headlines scrolled endlessly. The Davenport deception, CEO's empire crumbles in public takedown. From penthouse to prison socialite mastermind, arrested in multi-million-dollar honey trap scheme. The wife's gambit, Samantha Davenport, hailed as whistleblower who saved company. They didn't know the half of it. My lawyer Helen arrived mid-morning, looking energized by the chaos. She carried a stack of newspapers and a leather briefcase that seemed to hum with legal power. "Well," she announced, foregoing a hello as she spread the papers on the table. "You haven't just scorched the earth, you've salted it for a generation. It's a masterpiece of mutually assured destruction, except only one side got destroyed." She confirmed what the news was reporting. Cassandra, whose real name the FBI had confirmed as Catherine Peters, had been flagged by airport security the moment she tried to use her fake passport. The injunction freezing her assets had worked. The $10 million she'd siphoned just hours earlier was locked down, a piece of evidence in a case that federal prosecutors were calling a slam dunk. Jonathan's fate was in many ways more pathetic. Helen had received a call at dawn from the newly appointed legal counsel for Davenport Innovations. The board had held an emergency meeting that lasted all night. They had invoked a morality clause in his contract, a clause I had ironically insisted they include years ago, and had terminated his position as CEO and chairman effective immediately. Ben Carter, his former friend and partner, had been appointed interim CEO. Jonathan was now locked out of the building. He built his corporate accounts, frozen his reputation, not just tarnished, but incinerated. He was facing a tidal wave of litigation from shareholders, the SEC, and his own company. Later that afternoon, a call came through from Ben. His voice was heavy with exhaustion. "Sam," he said, "I don't know whether to congratulate you or send a therapist. What you did, it was brutal. And it was absolutely necessary." "How bad is it, Ben?" I asked. He sighed. "It's a bloodbath. The stock dropped 40% at the opening bell. We're in damage control with our biggest clients. But you saved us. The forensic accountant you hired gave us the roadmap. Cassandra was days away from initiating a full asset liquidation that would have bankrupted us completely. She'd embedded malware in our system to cover her tracks. She wasn't just stealing from Jonathan. She was staging a corporate coup. The employees. They know you saved their jobs. You're a hero around here." His words were a strange comfort, a validation that my actions had a purpose beyond my own personal pain. 2 days after the gala, the hotel concierge called up to my suite. "Ma'am, a Mr. Jonathan Davenport is in the lobby. He is insistent on seeing you." My heart gave a single hard thud, but it wasn't a thud of fear or love. It was the thump of a judge's gavel. "Send him up," I said. When I opened the door, the sight of him was jarring. The powerful, impeccably dressed man who had stood on that stage was gone. In his place was a hollowed-out shell. His Savile Row suit was rumpled as if he'd slept in it. Dark stubble shadowed his jaw, and his eyes, once sharp and confident, were now bloodshot, swollen, and filled with a desperate, pleading terror. He looked like a king who had been deposed, stripped of his finery, and cast out into the wilderness. "Sam," he rasped, his voice cracking, "please, can I just talk to you?" I stepped aside, letting him into the suite, but maintaining a careful distance. He collapsed onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. His shoulders shook with ragged, silent sobs. "They took everything," he finally whispered, looking up at me, his face a mess of tears and self-pity. "The company I built from nothing. My name is Mud. I'm ruined, Sam. Utterly ruined." "You weren't ruined, Jonathan," I replied, my voice as cold and clear as glass. "You were exposed." "She had me completely fooled," he pleaded, lurching forward. "She was in my head, twisting everything. She told me Ben was trying to stage a coup. She said you were consulting with divorce lawyers for months, plotting to take half the company as soon as the baby was born. She showed me faked emails from you to your lawyer. Every lie you exposed on that stage was a lie. She first told me to isolate me, to make me trust only her." I didn't move. I let him finish, let him spin his tale of victimhood. When he was done, the silence stretched between us. "And you believed her," I said. "It wasn't a question. You chose to believe a woman you had known for 6 months over your business partner of 15 years. You chose to believe her over your wife of 10. She didn't hold a gun to your head, John. She simply offered you a version of reality you found more convenient. A reality where you were the brilliant visionary, and I was the nagging hormonal wife standing in your way." I took a step closer, my voice dropping. "Did she force you to lie about the late nights? Did she type the address to the Sovereign into your phone, day after day? When I was in the hospital with a scare in my second trimester, and you said you were stuck on a conference call? Were you, or were you with her picking out jewelry? These were your choices, your lies. She was just the architect. You were the willing builder of your own downfall." He flinched, as if I had struck him. "I know," he choked out. "God, I know. I was arrogant. I was a fool. I threw away the only thing that ever mattered. I threw you away." He looked at my swollen belly, his eyes filled with a fresh wave of tears. "But our daughter, she's innocent in all this. She's all I have left. Please, Sam, don't take her from me. Let me be a father. Let me try to earn back something, anything." It was the plea of a man at the absolute bottom, clinging to the last piece of wreckage in a sea of his own making. But his tears didn't move me. I saw them for what they were, tears for his lost status, his shattered ego, his obliterated fortune. He wasn't mourning us, he was mourning himself. "Let me be perfectly clear," I said, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. "You will be a father to our child. That is her right. You will provide for her financially, as stipulated by the courts. You will have supervised visitation rights. You will be a line item in her life, a biological fact. But you will never again be a part of mine. There is no us to earn back. There is nothing to fix." I walked to the door and opened it. "This conversation is over. From now on, you will speak only to Helen. Any communication regarding our daughter will be done through our lawyers. There is nothing left for you and I to say to each other ever again." He stared at me, the finality of my words hitting him with the force of a physical blow. The last glimmer of hope died in his eyes, replaced by the stark, terrifying realization of his utter solitude. He had lost his company, his fortune, his friends, and now he had lost any hope of redemption with his family. He was utterly, completely alone, left with nothing but the endless, echoing cavern of his regret. He stumbled out of the suite without another word, a broken man disappearing down a long hallway. I closed the door, the click of the latch sounding like a final, definitive end. I didn't feel triumph or even satisfaction. I simply felt quiet. Placing a hand on my belly, I looked out the window at the endless blue sky, not at the ashes of the past, but at the clean, open space of the future I was about to build for myself and my daughter. And so, Samantha Davenport closed one chapter of her life to begin another, not as a victim of betrayal, but as the architect of her own rescue. Her story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise. She faced the ultimate deception, not with tears of defeat, but with a strategy born of courage and a mother's fierce love. She took back her power, protected her child's future, and proved that integrity and truth, even when they seem lost, can be the most formidable weapons of all. Jonathan was left with the ashes of his empire and a lifetime of regret, a stark lesson in the real cost of betrayal. If Samantha's journey from heartbreak to victory moved you, and if you believe in the power of truth, then show your support. Hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable real-life stories of justice and consequence. What did you think of Samantha's plan? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.